Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to another journey through the mists of history, where the past unfolds like a dream, soft and heavy with secrets. Tonight, we step into the world of Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, England's radiant monarch, whose elegance was legendary, whose power was unmatched, and whose hygiene, well, it might keep you awake if you think too hard about it. So, before you settle in, dim the lights. Perhaps light a candle, one that smells of lavender or rose, to carry you gently into this tale. If you enjoy these stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if it feels right. Now, let's ease into the fragrant, flickering world of Elizabethan England, where beauty was a performance and cleanliness was an illusion. Imagine, for a moment, a palace glowing under candlelight. Whitehall, the heart of Elizabeth's court, stretches before you with its grand stone walls, tapestries shimmering with gold thread, and windows tall enough to touch the stars. Musicians play softly, their notes drifting through the air like a lullaby. Ladies glide in gowns so heavy they rustle like autumn leaves. From a distance, it's a dream a Renaissance painting brought to life. But step closer, breathe deeply, and the dream shifts. The air is thick, warm, crowded with scents you didn't expect. Not just roses or lavender, but something heavier, sweat-soaked velvet, tallow candles dripping grease, wool that's seen too many days without water. This is the truth of Elizabeth's court, a place where beauty battled the body, and the body rarely won. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, was the star of this stage. History paints her as graceful, untouchable, a monarch who dazzled Europe with her wit and power. But behind the portraits, behind the powdered face and perfumed gloves, was a woman whose daily routines would shock us today. She rarely bathed, her gowns were never washed, her skin, coated in white lead and mercury, paid a price for her radiance. And yet, she turned these limitations into a kind of alchemy, crafting an image so potent it outlasted the stench of her time. Tonight, we'll peel back the layers of that image, not to judge, but to understand, to walk through her halls, to smell her world, to feel the weight of her crown. So, close your eyes, let your breath slow, and let's begin. Whitehall Palace was a marvel from the outside. Its towers rose against the London sky, flags snapping in the wind, a symbol of England's growing might. Inside, however, it was a different story. The corridors were long, the rooms packed with courtiers, servants, and petitioners, all pressed together in a space with no ventilation, no plumbing, and no concept of sanitation as we know it. The air was a tapestry of smells, some deliberate, some unavoidable. Imagine the scent of roasted meat from the kitchens mingling with the smoke of tallow candles, their animal fat wicks burning low and greasy. Add to that the odor of bodies, hundreds of them clad in heavy fabrics that hadn't touched water in months, if ever. Then layer on the perfumes, the herbs, the desperate attempts to mask it all. This was the atmosphere Elizabeth ruled, and she ruled it with precision. In the 16th century, hygiene wasn't about cleanliness in the modern sense. Water was distrusted, seen as a carrier of disease. People believed it opened the pores, letting illness seep into the body. Bathing, when it happened, was a rare event, often monthly, sometimes less. Instead, cleanliness was about appearance, about scent. If you smelled pleasant, you were clean. If you smelled rich, you were noble. Elizabeth understood this better than anyone. Her presence was a carefully curated cloud of fragrance: rose, musk, civet, lavender, clove. She didn't just walk into a room. She announced herself with scent, a queen whose perfume arrived before her footsteps. Her chambers were a fortress of fragrance. Pomander small orbs filled with herbs and spices hung from her waist or sat on her tables. Her gloves were soaked in rose oil, her gowns lined with sachets of dried flowers. When she moved through the court, she left a trail so intense it lingered in the air, a reminder of her power even after she'd gone. But this wasn't vanity, it was strategy. In a world where smell was status, Elizabeth's fragrance was a declaration. I am above you. I am untouchable. I am divine. And yet, beneath the silk and saffron, the truth persisted. Her body, like everyone's, sweated. Her clothes, like everyone's, absorbed it. The palace, for all its grandeur, was a battlefield of odors, and Elizabeth was its general. Let's pause here, in the quiet glow of her chambers. Picture her sitting before a mirror, her maids moving silently around her. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of ambergris and rosemary. A candle flickers, casting shadows on the tapestry-covered walls. Outside, the court buzzes with life, but here it's still. The queen is preparing, not just for the day, but for the performance of monarchy. Her face is painted with white lead, a paste called cerus, smoothed over her skin to create a flawless mask. Her cheeks are dabbed with vermilion, a mercury-based red to mimic youth. Her gloves are laid out, each pair steeped in oils that cost more than a servant's yearly wage. This is not a woman getting ready. This is a myth being built, layer by layer, scent by scent. But the myth came at a cost. The lead in her makeup burned her skin over time, leaving rashes and scars she hid with thicker layers. The mercury gave her tremors, perhaps even sleepless nights, but she never faltered. To falter was to admit weakness, and weakness was not allowed. Her maids knew this. They worked in silence, their hands steady as they applied the poison that made her radiant. They didn't speak of the redness around her nose or the flaking patches on her neck. They simply brushed on more powder, added more perfume, and carried on. This was their duty, to preserve the illusion, to keep the queen eternal. Now, imagine stepping closer to her wardrobe. The gowns hang like works of art, embroidered with gold, studied with pearls, heavy with history. But lean in, breathe deeply, and you'll catch something beneath the lavender sachets. These dresses are never washed. Water would ruin the velvet, fade the dyes, shrink the silk. Instead, they're brushed, aired out, scented with herbs. They carry the memory of every banquet, every council meeting, every summer day when the queen stood too long in a crowded hall. They smell of her sweat, her stress, her triumphs, and no amount of rose oil can erase that completely. This was normal, though. In Elizabeth's time, clothing wasn't disposable. A gown was an investment, often worth more than a house. To wash it was to risk destroying it. So, her attendants brushed the fabric with stiff bristles, hung it near windows to let the breeze carry away the worst of the odor, and stuffed it with sachets of clove and thyme. The result was a garment that looked pristine but smelled like a story of power, of survival, of a woman who refused to be ordinary. As you drift deeper into this world, picture the courtiers who surrounded her. They, too, played the game of scent. Men dabbed musk behind their ears. Women tucked pomanders into their corsets. The air in Whitehall was a war of fragrances, each noble trying to outdo the next, to smell richer, more refined, more worthy of the Queen's favor. But no one could match Elizabeth. Her scent was a signature, a blend so potent it could silence a room. Ambassadors wrote home about it, describing her presence as heavy in the air, a polite way of saying she overwhelmed the senses, and that was the point. To be near her was to be enveloped, to be reminded of her power with every breath. But power came with pressure. Elizabeth's hygiene wasn't about comfort, it was about control. A queen who ruled alone, without a husband or heir, had to be more than human. She had to be a symbol, untouchable, eternal. A hint of body odor, a stain on her gown, a crack in her painted face. These weren't just flaws, they were threats. They could unravel the myth she'd built, the myth that held her throne. So she layered on the perfume, the powder, the illusion, and her court followed suit. They smiled through the heat, breathed through their sleeves, and pretended the palace smelled like a garden. Because to admit otherwise was to admit the truth. Even queens were human, and humans were messy. As you rest your head now, let the hum of a distant fan carry you further into this story. Picture the palace at night, the candles burning low, the air thick with the day's scents. The illusion pauses, but only for a moment. Tomorrow she'll rise and rebuild it, scent by scent, layer by layer, and we'll follow her through the halls of Whitehall, past the perfumed gloves and unwashed gowns, to see what lies beneath the myth. For now, let the darkness take you. Let the story linger like a faint whiff of rose. We'll continue when you're ready. When you're ready. The candles are dimmer now, the palace quieter, but the air still holds the weight of Elizabeth's world. If you're just joining us, settle in, find a soft place to rest, and let the hum of history guide you. We're deep in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, where every gesture was a performance, every scent a strategy. Last time, we walked through the fragrant halls of Whitehall, where perfume battled the truth of unwashed bodies and unventilated rooms. Tonight, we move closer not to the Queen's image, but to her body, to the skin, the sweat, the pain she hid beneath layers of silk and lead. So, breathe slowly, let the world fade, and let's step behind the curtain. Elizabeth I was a vision in her portrait spell as moonlight, framed by a ruff that seemed to glow, her eyes sharp and her lips perfectly curved. But portraits lie. They show what the Queen wanted you to see. A monarch untouched by time, by illness, by humanity. In truth, her body told a different story. Beneath the white lead makeup, her skin was scarred from smallpox. Beneath the wigs, beneath the perfumed gloves, her hands trembled from years of mercury exposure. And her breath carried the secret of rotting teeth, a silent ache she masked with cloves and rosewater. This was the woman who ruled England, a woman who turned her flaws into armor, her pain into power. Let's start with her face, the canvas of her myth. Every morning, Elizabeth sat before a mirror while her maids worked their magic. They didn't call it makeup. They called it ceruse, a thick paste of white lead and vinegar, applied with a cloth or sponge. It smoothed her skin, erased her smallpox scars, and gave her the ghostly pallor that screamed nobility. Pale skin meant you didn't toil in the sun, that you were above the common folk. For Elizabeth, it was more than that tit was divinity. The ceruse made her look like a statue, eternal and untouchable, but it came with a cost. The lead sank into her pores, burning her skin, leaving rashes and sores that required more ceruse to hide. It was a vicious cycle. The more damage it caused, the more she needed it. Then came the vermilion, a mercury-based red pigment dabbed onto her cheeks and lips. It mimicked youth, vitality, the flush of health she no longer had. Mercury was poison, of course, creeping into her nerves, causing tremors and sleeplessness. But what choice did she have? A queen couldn't appear weak. Her maids knew the stakes. They applied the vermilion lightly, just enough to suggest life, never enough to crack the ceruse. They dusted crushed pearls over her cheeks for a shimmer that caught the candlelight. From a distance, she glowed. Up close, the illusion faltered. Diplomats noted how her face seemed to melt by evening, how the makeup cracked when she turned her head, but no one dared say it aloud. To see the queen's flaws was to risk her wrath. Her wigs were another layer of the performance. By her 40s, Elizabeth's hair was thinning, a casualty of age and smallpox. She turned to wigs, dozens of them, each a masterpiece of curls and coils, lacquered with wax and powdered with violet or cinnamon. They weren't washed, ever. Water would ruin the structure, and the wigs were too precious to risk. Instead, her attendants brushed them with squirrel-tail brushes, dusted them with scented starch, and stored them in boxes lined with mint leaves. But wigs absorb everything: sweat, smoke, the oil from her scalp. On hot days, they turned sour, a mix of perfume and something earthier. Courtiers learned to stand at a distance, to breathe shallowly when she leaned close. Her wigs were crowns, heavy and unyielding, and they carried the weight of her image. Now let's move to her hands. Always gloved, always scented. Elizabeth's gloves were more than fashion. They were a barrier between her and the world. Made of soft leather or silk, they were soaked in rose oil, lavender, or civetta musky scent scraped from the glands of a wild cat. She wore them constantly, offering them for courtiers to kiss, a ritual that spared them the touch of her skin. The gloves were rarely cleaned, only replaced when they grew too stiff. They carried the residue of meals, of ink, of long days gripping the throne, but their scent was overpowering, a shield against the truth. To kiss the queen's glove was to inhale her power, to be reminded that even her hands were untouchable. Her gowns, though, were the true archives of her reign. Each one was a fortune, embroidered with gold, lined with fur, heavy with pearls. They were never washed, only brushed and scented. Water would destroy the fabric, so her maids used stiff brushes to sweep away dust, hung the gowns near fires to dry the damp, and tucked sachets of lavender and clove into the folds. The result was a garment that looked pristine but smelled of history: sweat from a tense council meeting, wine from a banquet, the faint sourness of a summer day. Elizabeth's favorites were worn again and again, each one carrying her story in its seams. To stand close to her was to smell not just perfume, but the weight of her rule. Beneath the gowns, her undergarments were a small concession to hygiene. Linen shifts and stockings were changed more often, rinsed when possible, though not with soap as we know it. They were soaked in vinegar or rosewater, wrung out and hung to dry. But even these carried the truth of her body sweat, skin oils, the faint metallic temps of illness. Her corsets, stiff with whalebone, were never washed, only aired out. They held her posture rigid, her silhouette regal, but they also trapped heat and odor. In summer, the layers clung to her skin, the air thick with the clash of perfume and perspiration. Yet she stood tall, her face a mask, her scent a command. Now, let's talk about her breath, the secret she guarded most fiercely. Elizabeth loved sweet scandied violets, marzipan, sugared almonds. Sugar was a luxury, a sign of wealth, but it ravaged her teeth. By her 40s they were darkening, rotting, causing pain. She hid behind closed lips. She chewed cloves to mask. The smell held perfumed handkerchiefs to her face during audiences. Her physicians tried what they could: powders for the gums, opium pastes for the pain, but dentistry was crude, a last resort. Extractions were done in secret, behind closed doors, with no anesthetic, only a cloth to bite and a prayer to endure. Her breath grew sour, a mix of decay and spice, but no one dared flinch. To notice was to betray the myth. Imagine her now, in a quiet moment, alone with her maids. The candles are low, the air heavy with rose and musk. She sits, her wig removed, her face wiped clean of sea-roots. For a moment, she's not the queen, just a woman, tired, aching human. But even here, the performance doesn't end. Her maids dab vinegar on her temples, wrap her hands in scented cloths, and prepare her for sleep in a bed layered with herbs. The illusion must hold, even in dreams. As you drift now, picture that bed, the silk curtains drawn, the faint hum of a distant fire. Let the scent of lavender carry you deeper. We'll return to her world soon, to the rituals that kept her myth alive, even as her body faltered. The night is deep now, the world soft and quiet, perfect for slipping back into the past. If you're just joining us, find a cozy spot, let your eyes grow heavy, and imagine the glow of Whitehall Palace, where Queen Elizabeth I ruled not just with words, but with scent, with image, with illusion. We've walked through her fragrant halls and glimpsed the body beneath her crown. Now, let's explore the rituals that shaped her world, the daily acts of transformation that turned a woman into a myth. So, breathe deeply, let the hum of history soothe you, and let's continue. Elizabeth's day began with a ceremony, not of state, but of self. Her chambers were a stage, her maids the crew, and her body the canvas. Every morning they assembled, her layer by layer, scent by scent. The white lead smoothed her smallpox scars, hid the lines of age, and gave her the look of a porcelain goddess. Vermilion followed, a touch of red to her cheeks and lips, a dangerous glow that whispered youth. Her maids worked in silence, their hands steady, their eyes averted. They knew the stakes. One wrong move, one smudge, and the illusion could crack. Next came the wigs, towering sculptures of curls and wax, dusted with violet powder or cinnamon. They were never washed, only brushed and scented, their stiffness a reminder of their permanence. Elizabeth chose her wig carefully, each one a statement, bold for council meetings, delicate for suitors. The weight was punishing, pressing on her scalp, but she bore it without complaint. To complain was to admit weakness, and weakness was not queenly. Her maids pinned the wig in place, tucking stray strands of her thinning hair beneath it, ensuring no hint of reality escaped her gowns. Were a production of their own. Each one took hours to assemble, the corset laced tight, the sleeves pinned, the ruff starched to frame her face like a halo. The fabrics velvet, silk, brocade were too precious for water, so they were brushed, aired, and stuffed with sachets of lavender and clove. The scent was overwhelming, a mix of flowers and spice that masked the truth of unwashed fabric. Her maids moved with precision, lifting the heavy skirts, fastening the bodice, ensuring every fold fell perfectly. The gown wasn't just clothing, it was armor, a shield against scrutiny. Her gloves completed the transformation. Soft leather or silk, soaked in rose oil or civet, they were her final barrier. She offered them for courtiers to kiss, a ritual that spared them her skin, but bound them to her power. A reminder that even her hands were sacred. By the time she stepped into the hall, Elizabeth was no longer a woman. She was a monument, a walking portrait. A queen without a husband or heir had to be flawless, untouchable, divine. A stain on her gown, a crack in her makeup, a whiff of unmasked odor. These could spark gossip, doubt, even rebellion. So she perfected the performance, and her court followed suit. Nobles mimicked her habits, dabbing musk on their wrists, tucking pomanders into their sleeves, painting their faces until they, too, looked like statues. The air grew thick with competing scents, a fragrant war where status was measured in rosewater and ambergris. But the rituals extended beyond the body. The palace itself was part of the act. Servants hung lavender in corners, sprinkled rosewater on carpets, and burned juniper to clear the air. It wasn't enough to mask the stench of unwashed bodies and crude drains, but it was a valiant effort. The close stool Elizabeth's private toilet was a masterpiece of discretion, a padded chair hiding a chamber pot. Her maids cleaned it with vinegar, lined it with herbs, and draped it in linen. But the smell lingered, a quiet reminder of her humanity. No one spoke of it. To acknowledge the queen's bodily functions was to shatter the myth. Her health, too, was a ritual of concealment. Toothaches, fevers, aching joints, these were hidden behind closed doors. Her physicians prescribed cloves for her gums, opium for her pain, but their tools were limited. They spoke of humors and balance, not bacteria or infection. When her teeth rotted, they extracted them in secret, the pain dulled with spiced wine. When her fevers rose, they applied herb-soaked cloths to her forehead, hoping the scent would soothe her. Elizabeth endured it all, her face a mask, her voice steady. To show weakness was to invite chaos. So she stood through ceremonies, smiled through pain, and let the perfume carry her through. The court played along, their silence a form of loyalty. They ignored the tremble in her hands, the paleness beneath, her powder, the way she sometimes leaned on a maid for support. They praised her radiance, her strength, her eternal youth. It was a collective act, a shared belief in the myth. To question it was to question England itself. So they bowed, they smiled, they breathed through their handkerchiefs, and they pretended the air was sweet. As you drift now, imagine their faces, their careful gestures, the weight of their loyalty. The palace is quiet, the candles low. Let the story fades into the darkness, and we'll return to see how Elizabeth's illusion shaped her legacy. Asterisk, asterisk, the world is still now. The stars bright above the palace that no longer stands. We've walked through Queen Elizabeth I's fragrant halls, glimpsed her hidden body, and explored the rituals that made her a myth. Now, as the night grows deep, let's look at her legacy, not just as a queen, but as a woman who turned perfume into power, who made cleanliness a performance, and whose scent still lingers in our imagination. So, breathe slowly, let your eyes close, and let's drift into the final act. Elizabeth's reign was a triumph of image over reality. She ruled for 44 years, outwitting enemies, navigating wars, and cementing England's place on the world stage. But her greatest victory was her myth of Virgin Queen, eternal, untouchable, divine. That myth was built not with swords or treaties, but with powder, perfume, and relentless discipline. Every morning she painted her face, donned her wigs, and stepped into gowns that smelled of roses and history. Every evening she retreated behind curtains, her maids wiping away the day's illusion, and through it all she never faltered. Never let the world see the woman beneath the crown. Her hygiene, or lack of it, was a product of her time. The 16th century feared water, believed it carried disease. Bathing was rare, soap was harsh, and cleanliness was about scent, not sanitation. Elizabeth was cleaner than most, in her way. Her linens were changed, her hands wiped with rosewater, her gloves steeped in lavender. But her wigs were never washed, her gowns never soaked, her face coated in poison. She smelled like a queen rich, complex, overwhelming, but she lived in a body that ached, sweated, and suffered. The contrast is what fascinates us today, what keeps her alive in memes, podcasts, and late-night history binges. Why do we care about her hygiene? Elizabeth's myth was so perfect, so polished, that we crave the cracks, the sweat, the sores, the sour breath. We want to know that even a queen was flawed, that even a monarch stank. It makes her real, relatable, a reminder that power doesn't erase humanity, but it also makes us uneasy. Her rituals, hours spent painting her face, layering perfume, hiding paint, claustrophobic, a prison of expectation. We recognize that pressure, even now. We may have showers and soap, but we still perform, still mask our flaws, still fear being seen as less than perfect. Her court was a mirror of that pressure. Courtiers mimicked her habits, dabbing musk on their cuffs, painting their faces, chuckling in her melodic style. They didn't just admire her, they needed to be her, to blend into her myth. The air was thick with their efforts, a clash of rosewater, civet, and sweat. Meetings were held in rooms heavy with incense, banquets served on tablecloths soaked in lavender. It was a performance, a collective act of denial. No one mentioned the stench of the drains, the sourness of unwashed bodies, the faint rot beneath the floorboards. To speak of it was to break the spell, to admit that the Queen's world was human, not divine. Elizabeth's legacy, though, is more than her scent. It's the way she turned limitation into strength. She couldn't bathe daily, so she made perfume her power. She couldn't show weakness, so she made pain her secret. She couldn't marry without losing control, so she made chastity her crown. She ruled alone, a woman in a man's world, and she did it by being more than human. Her scent was her signature, her makeup, her mask, her rituals, her reign. Today, we laugh at her habits, but we also admire her. She ruled without shampoo, without dentistry, without plumbing. She stood in a palace that smelled of sweat and tallow, yet she made it smell like power. She was the Virgin Queen, the scented sovereign, a woman who turned rosewater into a weapon and silence into sovereignty. Her legacy is not just in the history books, but in the way we still chase perfection, still layer our lives with filters, and facades, to the quiet embrace of history, where the past whispers softly like a breeze through an ancient hall. If you're joining us now, find a gentle place to rest, perhaps beneath a blanket, with the faint hum of a fan or the flicker of a distant light to guide you. We've wandered through the perfumed corridors of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, and glimpsed the woman beneath the myth. Tonight, we delve deeper into the alchemy of her appearance, how she transformed the raw materials of her time into a spectacle of power, how she turned scent and ceremony into a kind of magic that held a kingdom spellbound. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's step back into the glow of Whitehall Palace, where every mirror reflected not just a queen, but a masterpiece. Picture the early morning, when the palace is still cloaked in shadow. The air is cool, heavy with the promise of dawn, and the scent of yesterday lingers: rosemary from the queen's chambers, tallow from burned-out candles, the faint musk of crowded rooms. Elizabeth rises, her bed draped in silk, her pillows stuffed with lavender to ward off nightmares. Her maids move silently, their footsteps muffled on the rush-strewn floor, as they prepare for the day's first ritual, the creation of the queen. This is no mere routine. It is a performance, a daily act of alchemy that turns flesh into legend. The tools are simple: lead, mercury, rosewater, wax, but the result is extraordinary: a monarch who seems to defy time, illness, and mortality itself. Let's begin with her chamber, a sanctuary of scent and secrecy. The walls are hung with tapestries, their threads catching the first light, telling stories of gods and heroes. A fire crackles in the hearth, its smoke mingling with the aroma of juniper branches, burned to purify the air. The windows are shuttered, not for privacy, but to keep out the damp London air, believed to carry disease. On a carved oak table sits an array of tools: pots of ceruse, vials of rose oil, brushes made of squirrel fur, and a silver mirror that reflects only what the queen allows. The air is thick, layered with fragrances: clove, ambergris, lavender, but beneath it lies the truth of the palace, the faint temps of unwashed linens, the earthy smell of bodies pressed too close. Elizabeth sits, her robe loose, her hair uncovered, a rare moment of vulnerability. Her maids, chosen for their discretion, move with practiced grace. They know the stakes. To dress the queen is to dress England. To paint her face is to paint a nation's confidence. The first step is her skin, the canvas of her myth. A maid dips a cloth into a pot of ceruse, the white lead paste that defines Elizabethan beauty. It's cold against the queen's skin, smoothed over her cheeks, her forehead, her neck, erasing the scars of smallpox that marked her in her 20s. The paste is thick, almost creamy, with a faint metallic smell that clings to the air. It dries to a flawless mask, pale as moonlight, a signal of nobility in a world where tanned skin meant labor and low birth. But the ceruse is more than makeup. It's a shield. It hides the redness of her cheeks, the lines around her eyes, the toll of sleepless nights spent worrying over Spain or Scotland. It's also poison, seeping into her pores, burning her skin over time. Elizabeth knows this. Her physicians whisper of Leeds dangers, but she has no choice. A queen must be flawless, her face a blank page for the story of her reign. The maid works carefully, blending the ceruse with a touch of vinegar to keep it smooth, ensuring no cracks form in the heat of a crowded hall. From a distance, Elizabeth will glow, her face a beacon of power. Up close, the illusion is fragile, the lead flaking at her temples, the skin beneath raw and tender. Next comes the vermilion, a scarlet pigment ground from cinnabar, a mercury, or it's applied sparingly, a dab on each cheek, a brush across her lips. The red mimics youth, health, the flush of vitality, but it's as dangerous as the ceruse. Mercury creeps into her bloodstream, causing tremors in her hands, headaches that linger like shadows. Yet Elizabeth endures it, her expression calm, her eyes fixed on the mirror. The maid's hands tremble, slightly not from nerves, but from the weight of responsibility. A smudge could ruin the effect. A heavy hand could crack the myth. So, she brushes lightly, blending the vermilion with crushed pearl powder to add a shimmer, catching the candlelight like a star. The wigs come next, a ritual of transformation. Elizabeth's natural hair, once a fiery red, is now thin and gray, a secret guarded by her maids. The wig is chosen with care, a cascade of curls for a public audience, a simpler coil for a private council. Each wig is a work of art, woven from human hair, stiffened with wax, and powdered with violet or orris root to mask its smell. Their never-washed water would ruin the shape, so they're brushed with soft bristles and stored in boxes lined with mint leaves. But wigs, like gowns, carry memories. They absorb the smoke of banquets, the sweat of summer, the oil of her scalp. On warm days, they grow heavy, sour, a faint reminder of the body beneath. Elizabeth sits still as the maid pins the wig in place, securing it with jeweled combs, ensuring no stray hair betrays the truth. Now, the gown. The wardrobe is a treasury, each dress a fortune in silk, velvet, and gold thread. Today's choice is a deep emerald, embroidered with silver roses, its sleeves slashed to reveal a cream-colored lining. The corset comes first, laced tight to sculpt her waist, its whalebone creaking as the maid pulls the strings. The gown follows, heavy and unyielding, its layers pinned and tied with precision. It's never been washed, nor will it be. Water would fade the dye, shrink the fabric, ruin the pearls sewn into the bodice. Instead, the maids brush it with stiff bristles, air it near an open window, and tuck sachets of lavender and clove into the folds. The scent is intoxicating, a cloud of spice and flowers, but it doesn't fully mask the gown's history sweat from a tense negotiation. Wine from a spilled goblet, the faint musk of a long reign. Her gloves are the final touch, a signature of her power. Made of soft kid leather, they're soaked in rose oil, their scent so strong it lingers in the air. Elizabeth slips them on, her hands hidden, her tremors concealed. The gloves are a barrier, a way to offer her hand without offering her skin. Courtiers will kiss them, their lips brushing leather instead of flesh, a ritual that binds them to her without breaking the illusion. The gloves aren't washed, only replaced when they grow to stiff, their surface stained with the day's work, chink, grease, the residue of power. Yet their fragrance is overwhelming, a reminder that even her touch is sacred. This alchemy extends beyond her body to her surroundings. The chamber is a stage, its props carefully chosen. Pomander's silver orbs, filled with ambergris and rosemary, hang from her waist, their scent drifting as she moves. A bowl of rose water sits by the mirror, used to dab her temples, her wrists, her neck. The rushes on the floor are strewn with thyme, crushed underfoot to release a sharp, clean smell. The air is a tapestry of fragrances, each one a deliberate choice to mask the truth. The palace is old, its drains crude, its rooms crowded with bodies that rarely bathe. The maids burn juniper in a corner, its smoke curling upward, a faint attempt to purify the air. It's not enough, but it's part of the performance. The courtiers, too, are alchemists in their own right. They mimic Elizabeth's habits, painting their faces with ceruse, dabbing musk behind their ears, tucking pomanders into their sleeves. Men wear velvet doublets, their collars starched, their beards oiled with civet. Women layer their gowns with sachets, their hair pinned with jeweled nets that smell of violet powder. The air in the great hall is a battlefield of scents, each noble vying to outshine the next, to smell richer, more refined, more worthy of the queen's favor. But no one can match Elizabeth. Her fragrance is a command, a blend of rose musk, an authority that silences the room. To stand near her is to be enveloped, to breathe in her power with every inhale. This ritual, this alchemy, is not just about beauty. It's about survival. Elizabeth rules alone, a woman in a world of men, a queen without a husband or heir. Every floor crack in her makeup, a whiff of sweat, a tremble in her hand is a potential weakness, a chink in her armor. So she perfects the illusion layer by layer, scent by scent. Her maids are her alchemists, her chamber, her laboratory, her body the raw material they transform. The result is a queen who seems eternal, untouchable, divine. But the cost is high. The lead burns her skin, the mercury clouds her mind, the wigs weigh on her scalp. She endures it all, because to falter is to fall. Imagine her now, stepping into the hall. The courtiers bow, their eyes lowered, their breath held. She moves like a painting come to life, her gown rustling, her perfume announcing her presence. The air shifts, heavy with rose and clove, and for a moment the palace feels clean, sacred, perfect. But beneath it all, the truth persists. The sweat-soaked velvet, the sour wigs, the aching body beneath the crown. Elizabeth knows this, but she carries on, her face a mask, her scent a weapon. As you drift now, picture that hall, the candles, flickering the air thick with illusion. Let the scent of history carry you deeper into the quiet of the past. We'll pause here in the glow of her court and return when you're ready to continue. If you're joining us now, find a quiet corner, perhaps with a pillow to cradle your head or the gentle hum of a fan to lull you. We've wandered through the radiant halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, and witnessed the alchemy that turned her into a myth. Tonight, we shift our gaze to the courtiers who surrounded her men and women who mirrored her rituals, who wove their own illusions of cleanliness, and who lived in a world where status and appearance was everything. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the perfumed masquerade of Elizabeth's court. Imagine the great hall of Whitehall Palace, its stone walls softened by tapestries, its high ceiling lost in shadow. The air is warm, thick with the glow of 100 candles, their tallow wicks burning low, releasing a greasy smoke that clings to the velvet and silk of the gathered crowd. Musicians play softly in a corner, their lutes and viols weaving a melody that feels like a caress. Courtiers move through the space, their footsteps muffled by rushes strewn with time, their voices a low murmur of flattery and ambition. From a distance, it's a scene of eleganza, Renaissance dream of color and grace. But step closer, breathe deeply, and the dream shifts. The air is a tangle of scents, rosewater and musk, sweat and wool, the sharp bite of unwashed bodies. Beneath layers of perfume, this is the court's masquerade, where everyone plays a part and cleanliness is a performance. Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, is the center of this world, her presence a beacon that draws every eye. Her fragrance rose, clove, ambergris scuds through the air like a command, her painted face glowing under the candlelight, her gown a fortress of silk and gold. But the courtiers are not mere spectators, they are actors, each one striving to reflect her radiance, to prove their worth through the alchemy of appearance. They, too, paint their faces, dab their wrists with oil, and layer their clothing with sachets of lavender and civet. They mimic her rituals, not out of devotion alone, but because to fall short is to fade into obscurity. In Elizabeth's court, to be seen is to survive, and to be seen requires scent. Picture a noblewoman, Lady Margaret, standing near the throne. Her gown is a deep burgundy, its sleeves embroidered with silver thread, its bodice tight with whalebone. She's young, ambitious, her eyes sharp as she scans the room for allies or rivals. Her face is painted with ceruse, the white lead paste that mirrors the Queen's flawless mask. It smooths her skin, hides the freckles from a childhood spent outdoors, and gives her the pale, noble look that screams privilege. But the ceruse is heavy, flaking at her jaw by midday, itching where it meets her ruff. She ignores it, her smile fixed, her fan moving slowly to stir the air. Beneath the paint, her skin stings, the lead sinking deeper with every hour. But she knows the rules. Beauty is pain, and pain is power. Her cheeks are touched with vermilion, the mercury-based red that mimics a youthful flush. It's a dangerous choice, one she shares with the Queen. The mercury makes her hands tremble slightly as she adjusts her ruff, but she hides it, tucking her fingers into her gloves. Those gloves, like Elizabeth's, are steeped in rose oil, their scent strong enough to mask the faint sourness of her unwashed hands. She wears a pomander at her waist, a silver orb filled with ambergris and rosemary, its fragrance drifting as she moves. It's not enough to cover the smell of her gown, which hasn't been washed in months. It's velvet heavy with the memory of banquets and summer heat. But it's enough to signal her status, to place her among the elite who can afford such luxuries. Now, imagine a nobleman, Lord Thomas, standing across the hall. His doublet is black, slashed to reveal a silk lining, its collar starched to frame his face. His beard is trimmed, oiled with civet, a musky scent that marks him as a man of means. He, too, wears ceruse, though less heavily than the women, a light dusting to pale his cheeks and hide the scars of a youthful duel. The lead itches, but he doesn't scratch. To show discomfort is to show weakness. His hands are gloved, leather scented with clove, and he carries a handkerchief soaked in lavender to press to his nose when the air grows too heavy. His boots, polished to a shine, creak softly as he shifts his weight, their leather absorbing the damp of the rushes, the faint stink of the palace floor. the courtiers' rituals mirror Elizabeth's, but they're not identical. Where the Queen's appearance is a command, theirs is a plea for favor, for notice, for a place in her orbit. They spend fortunes on their scents, importing musk from the East, rosewater from France, ambergris from the shores of distant oceans. A single vial of perfume costs more than a servant's yearly wage, but it's worth it. To smell rich is to be rich, to smell noble is to be noble. They tuck sachets into their sleeves, pin jeweled pomanders to their belts, and sprinkle their ruffs with violet powder. The result is a cacophony of fragrances, each one vying for dominance. Each one a declaration of loyalty to the Queen's aesthetic. But the court's masquerade is not just about scent. It's about survival in a world where hygiene is a myth. Bathing is rare, feared as a gateway to illness. Water, they believe, opens the pores, letting disease slip in. Instead, cleanliness is about appearance, about masking the body's truth. With layers of artifice, the courtiers' linens, shifts, stockings, chemises are changed more often than their outer garments, rinsed in vinegar or rosewater, but never truly clean. Their corsets and doublets, like Elizabeth's gowns, are brushed and aired, never washed. The fabrics hold the weight of their lives' sweat from a dance, grease from a feast, the faint tang of fear from a tense audience with the Queen. The palace itself is complicit in the masquerade. Servants sweep the rushes daily, replacing them with fresh ones sprinkled with thyme or mint. They burn juniper in braziers, hoping to clear the air of miasmas, the invisible vapors blamed for plague and fever. They sprinkle rosewater on tables, hang lavender in corners, and scrub the close stools with vinegar. But the palace is old, its drains shallow, its rooms packed with bodies. The air is never truly clean, only layered with enough fragrance to make you believe it is. The courtiers move through it, pretending the world smells like a garden. This pretense extends to their behavior. No one mentions the Queen's breath, soured by rotting teeth, or the faint tremor in her hands from years of mercury. No one remarks on the sourness of Lady Margaret's gown or the sweat beading on Lord Thomas's brow. To notice is to betray the illusion, to admit that the court is not divine but human, flawed, fragile. So they smile, they bow, they compliment each other's radiance. They laugh at Elizabeth's jests, their voices melodic, their faces painted to match hers. It's a collective act, a shared belief in the myth of cleanliness, of perfection, of power, but beneath the perfume, the truth persists. The courtier's skin itches under the lead, their lungs burn from the smoke, their bodies ache from the weight of their clothing. They suffer quietly, just as Elizabeth does, because to suffer openly is to lose everything. They watch her, their eyes sharp, their senses attuned to her every move. When she raises her glove, they kiss it, inhaling the rose oil, ignoring the faint stiffness of the leather. When she speaks, they lean closer, breathing through their handkerchiefs, pretending her breath is as sweet as her words. When she dances, they follow, their heavy gowns dragging through the rushes, their perfumes mingling with hers. As you drift now, imagine the great hall at twilight, the candles burning low, the air heavy with the day's scents. The courtiers move like shadows, their faces pale, their fragrances fading. Elizabeth stands at the center, her gown a pool of silk, her scent a crown. The masquerade continues, a dance of illusion and ambition, of loyalty and sacrifice. Let the hum of the past carry you deeper into the quiet of the night. Picture the palace settling, the music fading, the candles flickering out. We'll pause here in the glow of the court's performance and return when you're ready to continue. If you're joining us now, find a quiet place to rest, perhaps with a soft blanket, the faint hum of a fan, or the glow of a single candle to guide you. We've wandered through the perfumed halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, and watched the courtiers masquerade of scent and splendor. Tonight, we step behind the scenes, into the fragile framework that supported the illusion of cleanliness, the palace's creaking infrastructure, the tireless work of its servants, and the beliefs that shaped a world where water was feared and fragrance was king. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the shadowed corners of Whitehall, where the truth of hygiene hides. Imagine the palace at dawn, before the courtiers stir, before the queen's maids begin their alchemy. The air is cool, heavy with the lingering scents of last night's banquet-trousted venison, spilled wine, the greasy smoke of tallow candles. The great hall is quiet, its tapestries still, its rushes damp with dew from an open window. But beneath the silence, the palace is alive with movement. Servants scurry through narrow corridors, their arms laden with linen, their hands raw from vinegar and lye. They are the unsung architects of the court's illusion, the ones who sweep away the day's dirt, sprinkle herbs to mask the stench, and keep the myth of cleanliness alive. Without them, the palace would crumble under the weight of its own reality. Whitehall was a marvel from the outside, its towers rising against the Thames, its walls a symbol of England's might. But inside, it was a labyrinth of contradictions, grand yet grimy, opulent yet crude. There was no plumbing, no running water, no sanitation as we know it. The palace relied on a network of privies, chamber pots, and shallow drains that often overflowed, especially in summer. The air carried the faint tang of waste, a reminder that even the Queen's court was tethered to the body's needs. Servants worked tirelessly to manage this, emptying pots, scrubbing privies, and burning herbs to clear the air. But their efforts were a bandage on a wound that never healed, a constant battle against the palace's own decay. Let's follow a servant, Jane, as she begins her day. She's young, her hands calloused, her apron stained with the work of yesterday. Her task is to prepare the Queen's chambers, to ensure they smell of roses and power before Elizabeth wakes. She starts with the rushes, the dried reeds that cover the floor like a carpet. They're strewn with thyme and mint, crushed underfoot to release a sharp, green scent. But they're also damp, heavy with spilled wine, grease, and the footsteps of 100 courtiers. Jane sweeps them out, her broom stirring dust that catches the light and replaces them with fresh rushes from a storeroom near the kitchens. The new rushes are sprinkled with lavender, their fragrance a fleeting defense against the palace's deeper odors. Next, she turns to the close stool, the Queen's private toilet, a padded chair hiding a chamber pot. It's a delicate task, one reserved for trusted servants. Jane empties the pot into a bucket, her nose wrinkling at the sharp smell, and scrubs the wood with vinegar-soaked rags. She lines the pot with fresh herbs, rosemary, sage, anything to mask the truth, and drapes a linen cloth over the seat. The close stool is a masterpiece of discretion, its velvet cushion embroidered with gold. But it's still a reminder of the Queen's humanity, a secret Jane guards with her silence. No one speaks of it, not even the other maids. To acknowledge the Queen's bodily functions is to shatter the myth, and myths are fragile things. The palace's drains are another challenge. They're shallow, lined with stone, and prone to clogging. In summer, when the Thames runs low, the drains stagnate, their contents seeping into the air. Servants like Jane pour buckets of vinegar down them, hoping to cut the stench, but it's a losing battle. The courtiers notice. Of course, they press scented handkerchiefs to their noses, fan themselves in crowded halls, but they say nothing. The Queen's presence demands perfection, and perfection means pretending the palace is clean. So, Jane and her fellow servants burn juniper in braziers, hang lavender in corners, and sprinkle rosewater on every surface. The air grows heavy, a tapestry of scents woven to hide the truth. The cultural beliefs of the time shape this fragile framework. In Elizabethan England, water is not a friend but a foe. Physicians warn that bathing opens the pores, letting in miasmous vapors believed to carry disease. The plague, a constant threat, looms large in everyone's mind, and water is seen as its ally. Instead, cleanliness is about scent, about masking the body's natural odors with something sweeter, richer, more noble. Soap exists, but it's crude, made from lye and animal fat, harsh enough to strip the skin. Most prefer vinegar or rosewater, gentler on the skin and fragrant enough to signal status. Even the Queen, who bathes more often than most perhaps, once a month, does so with caution, her tub lined with linen, her water scented with herbs to ward off illness. Elizabeth's own hygiene is a delicate balance. Her linen shifts, stockings, chemises are changed daily, rinsed in rose water or vinegar, hung to dry by a fire. But her outer garments, the heavy gowns of velvet and silk, are never washed. Water would ruin the dyes, shrink the fabric, dull the gold thread. Instead, her maids brush them with stiff bristles, air them near open windows, and tuck sachets of clove and lavender into the folds. The result is a gown that looks pristine but smells of history, sweat from a council meeting, wine from a feast, the faint musk of a woman who carries a kingdom. Her wigs, too, are unwashed, their curls stiffened with wax, their scent preserved with violet powder. They carry the weight of her reign, absorbing every moment she wears them. The servants who maintain this illusion are invisible, their work unseen. Jane and her peers rise before dawn, sleep after midnight, their hands raw from scrubbing, their lungs heavy with smoke. They carry buckets of water from the Thames, boil it with herbs for the Queen's rare baths, and haul away the palace's waste. They polish the silver pomanders, refill them with ambergris, and stitch sachets for the Queen's gowns. Their labor is the foundation of the court's masquerade, the scaffolding that holds up Elizabeth's myth. Yet they're rarely seen, their names forgotten, their lives a footnote in the Queen's story. These beliefs and practices ripple outward, shaping the courtiers' lives. They, too, avoid water, relying on scent to prove their cleanliness. Their linens are rinsed when possible, but their doublets, corsets, and gowns are brushed and scented, never washed. They dab musk on their wrists, tuck pomanders into their sleeves, and powder their faces with lead and mercury, just like the queen. The air in the great hall is a war of fragrances, each courtier striving to outshine the next, to smell richer, more refined, more worthy of Elizabeth's favor. But no one can match her. Her centros, clove, ambergris is a signature, a declaration of divinity that silences the room. The fragility of this framework is most evident in summer, when the palace grows unbearable. The heat thickens the air, turning gowns sour, wigs heavy, makeup runny, the drains overflow, the rushes rot, and even the strongest perfumes falter. Courtiers fan themselves, their smiles fixed, their handkerchiefs pressed to their noses. Elizabeth, too, feels the strain, her cuirass melting, her gloves sticking to her hands. But she never falters. She stands through long ceremonies, her face a mask, her scent a shield. To show weakness is to invite doubt, and doubt is a luxury she cannot afford. As you drift now, picture the palace at dusk, the servants moving like shadows, their hands busy with brushes and herbs. The air is heavy, layered with lavender and smoke, but beneath it lies the trutho world of sweat, waste, and fragile illusions. Jane pauses, her broom still, her eyes on the fading light. The queen is somewhere above, her myth intact, her court aglow. Let the hum of history carry you deeper into the quiet of the past. The palace settles, the scents linger, and the story waits for your return. We've wandered through the perfumed halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, watched the courtiers masquerade, and glimpsed the fragile framework of cleanliness that held it all together. Tonight, we step into a darker corner of her world, exploring the hidden cost of beauty, the toll that Elizabethan hygiene practices took on the queen and her court, the silent pains they endured to maintain the illusion of divinity. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the quiet ache of Whitehall Palace, where beauty was both a crown and a curse. Imagine the Queen's chambers at twilight, the air heavy with the day's warmth, the scent of rosewater and clove lingering like a memory. The candles burn low, casting long shadows across the tapestries, their threads glinting with gold. Elizabeth sits before her mirror, her maids moving silently, their hands steady as they remove her wig, her gloves, her heavy gown. For a moment, she is not the Virgin Queen, but a woman, her face bare, her skin raw, her body weary from the weight of her image. The mirror reflects the truth, a woman whose beauty is a battlefield, whose health is a secret war fought behind closed doors. The lead paint, the mercury blush, the unwashed fabrics, they are the tools of her power, but they are also her poison, eating away at her body with every passing day. Let's begin with her face, the canvas of her myth. Every morning, her maids apply ceruse, the white lead paste that gives her the pale, flawless look of a goddess. It smooths the scars of smallpox, hides the lines of age, and declares her nobility in a world where pale skin is a mark of privilege. But the ceruse is a slow poison. It sinks into her pores, burning her skin, leaving rashes and sores that itch in the heat of a crowded hall. By her 40s, Elizabeth's face bears the marks of this daily ritual redness around her nose, flaking patches on her cheeks, a sensitivity that worsens with every application. Her maids apply more ceruse to hide the damage, a vicious cycle that traps her in its grip. The lead creeps deeper into her blood, her bones, causing headaches, fatigue, perhaps even the sleepless nights she spends pacing her chambers. The vermilion on her cheeks and lips is no kinder, made from cinnabar, a mercury, or it mimics the flush of youth, but it carries a heavier price. Mercury is a subtle poison seeping into her nerves, causing tremors in her hands. A faint shake she hides beneath her gloves. It clouds her mind at times, bringing irritability or moments of fog that she masks with sharp wit. Her physicians know the dangers they whisper of quicksilver sickness in their private notes, but they dare not speak too loudly. To suggest the queen abandoned her makeup is to suggest she abandoned her power. So, they offer salves of honey and chamomile, hoping to soothe her skin, but the damage is done. Elizabeth's natural hair, once a vibrant red, is now thin and gray, a casualty of age and illness. The wigs hide this, their lacquered curls dusted with violet powder, their scent preserved with orris root, but they are never washed, only brushed and aired, their stiffness a testament to their permanence. They absorb the sweat of her scalp, the smoke of banquets, the dust of the palace, growing heavy and sour over time. In summer, they trap heat, pressing on her scalp, causing headaches that throb behind her eyes. Yet she wears them without complaint, her posture regal, her smile fixed. To remove them in public would be to reveal her mortality, and mortality is not allowed for a queen who rules alone. Her gowns, too, exact a toll. The heavy velvet, the tight corsets, the layers of silk, they are magnificent, but they are also prisons. The corsets, laced with whalebone, sculpt her silhouette, but they restrict her breath, pinch her ribs, and trap heat against her skin. In summer, the layers cling to her, the sweat soaking into the fabric, the sachets of lavender and clove struggling to mask the odor. The gowns are never washed, only brushed and scented, their weight a constant reminder of her role. They chafe her skin, especially where the smallpox scars linger, but she stands through long ceremonies, her face a mask, her body aching. Her maids see the redness, the faint welts, but they say nothing, only apply more rosewater, more powder, to keep the illusion intact. Her teeth are perhaps the greatest secret, the hidden pain she guards most fiercely. Elizabeth loves sweet-scanned violets, marzipan, sugared almonds, a luxury that marks her wealth but ravages her mouth. By her 40s, her teeth are darkening, rotting, causing pain that shoots through her jaw. She chews cloves to mask the smell, holds perfumed handkerchiefs to her face during audiences, but the decay is relentless. Her physicians try what they can, powders of sage for her gums, opium pastes for the pain, but dentistry is crude, a last resort. Extractions are done in secret, behind closed doors, with no anesthetic, only a cloth to bite and a prayer to endure. Each loss leaves her weaker, her speech softer, her smile more guarded. Yet she carries on, her breath a mix of spice and decay, her myth unbroken. The courtiers, too, pay a price for their beauty. They mimic Elizabeth's rituals, painting their faces with ceruse, dabbing vermilion on their cheeks, wearing wigs and gloves steeped in musk. The lead burns their skin, the mercury clouds their minds, the heavy fabrics chafe their bodies. They suffer quietly, their smiles fixed, their fans fluttering to stir the air. Lady Margaret, with her burgundy gown, hides the rashes on her neck beneath a starched ruff. Lord Thomas, with his oiled beard, ignores the tremors in his hands as he bows to the Queen. They know the cost, but they pay it willingly, because to falter is to lose favor, and favor is everything in Elizabeth's court. The palace itself is a silent witness to this suffering. The air, thick with rosewater and smoke, cannot hide the truth of illness. The drains, shallow and clogged, breed miasma's vapors, blamed for plague and fever. The courtiers fear these invisible threats, pressing scented handkerchiefs to their noses, burning juniper to clear the air. But the real danger lies in their own rituals, the lead and mercury, the unwashed fabrics, the crowded rooms. They weaken the body, leaving it vulnerable to the diseases that stalked the 16th century. Smallpox, sweating sickness, consumption, these are constant shadows. And the court's hygiene practices offer little protection. Elizabeth's physicians are limited by the knowledge of their time. They speak of humor's blood, phlegm, choler, melancholy, and balance, not germs or sanitation. When the Queen falls ill, they prescribe herb-soaked cloths for her forehead, spiced wine for her pain, prayers for her recovery. When her fevers rise, they bleed her, hoping to restore balance, but the cuts weaken her further. When her teeth ache, they offer cloves and opium, but the rot continues. They work in secret, their treatments hidden behind curtains, because a sick queen is a weak queen, and weakness invites rebellion. The courtiers, too, hide their ailments, masking coughs with laughter, fevers with powder, pain with perfume. The cultural fear of water compounds the problem. Bathing is seen as dangerous, a gateway to illness. Even Elizabeth, who bathes more than most perhaps, monthly does so with caution. Her tub lined with linen, her water scented with herbs. The courtiers follow suit, relying on rosewater and vinegar to cleanse their skin, avoiding water at all costs. The result is a court where illness festers beneath the surface, hidden by scent and ceremony. The air is a battlefield, not just of fragrances, but of unseen threats, bacteria, toxins, the slow poison of beauty itself. Yet Elizabeth endures, her myth stronger than her body. She stands through banquets, her gown heavy, her face painted, her scent overwhelming. She laughs through pain, her voice clear, her wit sharp. Her courtiers follow, their own suffering a mirror of hers, their loyalty a silent vow to preserve the illusion. The cost is high, but the reward is higher, a place in the Queen's orbit, a share in her glory, a chance to be part of history. As you drift now, picture the palace at night, the candles dim, the air heavy with lavender and pain. Elizabeth sleeps, her body aching, her myth intact. Let the hum of history carry you deeper into the quiet of the past. The hall grows still, the scents linger, and the story waits for your return. We've wandered through the radiant halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, watched the courtiers masquerade, and mourned the hidden cost of their beauty. Tonight, we step into a new layer of her world, where scent is not just a mask, but a weapon, a political tool that shaped alliances, signaled power, and defined the hierarchy of her court. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the perfumed politics of Whitehall Palace, where every fragrance told a story of ambition and authority. Picture the great hall at midday, sunlight streaming through tall windows, catching the gold thread in tapestries and the pearls on Elizabeth's gown. The air is warm, thick with the scents of 100 bodies: rosewater, musk, civet, lavender, all clashing in a fragrant symphony. Courtiers move like dancers, their steps measured, their smiles calculated, each one aware that to stand near the Queen is to be seen, to be scented, to be remembered. Elizabeth herself is a vision, her face painted white, her wig a cascade of curls, her gloves steeped in rose oil. But her true power lies not in her appearance, but in her fragrancy, carefully crafted blend of rose, clove, and ambergris that announces her presence before she speaks. In her court, scent is not just personal, it is political, a language of dominance and diplomacy. Elizabeth understood this better than anyone. In the 16th century, fragrance was a currency, a sign of wealth and status that could open doors or close them. A queen who smelled divine was a queen who ruled with divine favor. Her perfume was not a luxury, but a strategy, a way to overwhelm ambassadors, charm suitors, and silence rivals. When she entered a room, her scent arrived first, a cloud of rose and musk that demanded attention. Diplomats wrote home about it, their letters describing her as clothed in fragrance. To stand in her presence was to breathe her power, to feel her authority in every inhale. This was no accident. It was a performance honed over decades, as deliberate as her speeches or her treaties. Let's imagine a French ambassador, Monsieur de la Mothe, newly arrived at Whitehall. He stands in the presence chamber, his doublet stiff with embroidery, his hands gloved in leather, scented with jasmine. He's prepared for this moment, his own fragrance, chosen to impress, but nothing prepares him for Elizabeth. She glides toward him, her gown rustling, her perfume enveloping him like a tide. The rose is sharp, the clove warm, the ambergris heavy with an animal depth that speaks of distant shores and royal wealth. Later, he writes to his king, describing not just her words, but her fragrance, a detail that carries as much weight as her promises of alliance. In Elizabeth's court, scent is diplomacy, a silent negotiation that shapes the fate of nations. The courtiers play this game as well, their fragrances a bid for favor. Lady Margaret, with her burgundy gown, wears a pomander filled with civet. Its musky scent a nod to the Queen's own preferences. She knows that to smell like Elizabeth is to align herself with power, to signal loyalty in a way that words cannot. Her pomander, a silver orb pierced with holes, cost her a month's income, but it's worth it. When she stands near the Queen, her fragrance blends with Elizabeth's, a subtle flattery that earns her a smile, a moment of notice. Lord Thomas, with his oiled beard and clove-scented gloves, follows suit, his scent a careful echo of the Queen's. He dabs musk behind his ears, a bold choice that marks him as ambitious, but he tempers it with lavender to avoid outshining her. In this court, to smell too strong is to challenge the Queen. To smell too weak is to be forgotten. The hierarchy of scent is rigid, unspoken, but understood. Only the wealthiest can afford the rarest fragrances from the belly of a whale, musk from the glands of a deer, civet scraped from a wild cat. These are the scents of the elite, imported at great cost, their richness a badge of status. Lesser nobles make do with rosewater or clove, still expensive, but within reach. Servants, like Jane from our last tale, rely on simpler herbs: thyme, rosemary, mint gathered from the palace gardens, or bought in cheap bundles at market. Their scent marks them as invisible, their labor unscented by the luxury of power. When Jane sweeps the rushes or scrubs the close stool, her hands smell of vinegar and sage, a sharp contrast to the Queen's rose-drenched gloves. This hierarchy extends to the palace itself. Elizabeth's chambers are a fortress of fragrance, their air thick with ambergris and lavender, their tapestries sprinkled with rosewater. The great hall, where courtiers gather, is layered with competing scents, a battlefield of musk and civet, of grease and waste and unwashed bodies. Servants burn juniper to mask the stench, sprinkle thyme on the floors, but the air remains heavy, a reminder of the palace's limits. Elizabeth rarely visits these spaces, but her courtiers do, their handkerchiefs pressed to their noses, their perfumes a shield against the truth. Scent also shapes the court's rituals. At banquets, tables are draped with linen soaked in rosewater, their surfaces gleaming under candlelight. When Elizabeth dances, her movements stir the air, her perfume mingling with the sweat of her partners. Courtiers watch, their own fragrances fading, their fans fluttering to keep pace. During audiences, ambassadors offer gifts of perfume vials, of musk, pomanders of gold, knowing that to please the Queen is to please her senses. She accepts them with a smile, her gloves masking the tremble in her hands, her scent overpowering theirs. But the politics of perfume are not without risk. A scent too strong could offend the Queen. A scent too weak could mark you as unworthy. Lady Margaret once wore a new fragrance, a bold mix of civet and orange blossom, hoping to stand out. The Queen noticed, her eyes narrowing, her smile cool. The next day, Lady Margaret returned to civet alone, her lesson learned. Lord Thomas, too, faced scrutiny when his musk grew heavy in a crowded hall, drawing whispers of ambition. He tempered it with lavender, bowing lower to the Queen, his scent subdued. Elizabeth's fragrance was the sun. All others were mere stars, permitted to shine only in her light. The health costs of this fragrant politics linger beneath the surface. Elizabeth's tremors, her rotting teeth, her raw skin, these are mirrored in her courtiers, who suffer in silence to maintain the illusion. The air, thick with perfume, hides the truth of illness, of bodies strained by poison and pretense. Yet the politics of scent are too powerful to abandon. To smell divine is to be divine. To rule is to overwhelm. And Elizabeth wields this power with unmatched skill as you drift now. Picture the great hall at dusk, the candles low, the air heavy with rose and musk. Elizabeth stands at the center, her fragrance a crown, her courtiers orbiting like planets, their scents a quiet tribute. The ambassadors bow, their gifts of perfume gleaming in the light. The palace hums with ambition, with loyalty, with the unspoken language of scent. Let the hum of history carry you deeper into the quiet of the past. The hall grows still, the fragrances linger, and the story waits for your return. We've wandered through the radiant halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, watched the courtiers' fragrant masquerade, and uncovered the hidden costs of their beauty. Tonight, we leave the stone walls of Whitehall behind and follow Elizabeth on her royal progresses, her grand tours across England, where the illusion of cleanliness faced new challenges, and scent became a shield against the chaos of the road. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the open air of Elizabethan England, where the Queen's fragrance reigned supreme. Imagine a summer morning, the air warm and heavy with the scent of grass and dust. Court is on the move, a glittering caravan stretching across the countryside. Horses clop along muddy roads, their hooves stirring clouds of earth that cling to velvet and silk. Carriages creak under the weight of gowns, wigs, and pomade, while servants trudge behind, carrying buckets of rosewater and bundles of herbs. The Queen herself rides in a gilded litter, its curtains embroidered with gold, its cushions stuffed with lavender to mask the smell of leather and sweat. From a distance, it's a spectacle, a moving palace of color and grace. But closer, the truth emerges, the heat, the dust, the unwashed bodies, all battling the Queen's carefully crafted fragrance. Elizabeth's progresses were more than royal tours. They were performances, a chance to display her power to her subjects, to dazzle nobles, and to reinforce her myth as the Virgin Queen. She traveled to great estates, to towns, to universities, her arrival heralded by trumpets and cheers. But life on the road was a test of her court's hygiene rituals. Without the controlled environment of Whitehall, the illusion of cleanliness was harder to maintain. The air was unpredictable, now sweet with hay, now sour with livestock. Yet Elizabeth's scent remained her signature, a blend of rose, clove, and ambergris that announced her divinity. Even in the chaos of travel, picture her arriving at a noble's estate, perhaps Kenilworth, the home of her favorite, Robert Dudley. The castle gleams, its towers draped with banners, its courtyard swept clean for her arrival. But the air tells a different story. Wood smoke from the kitchens, damp stone from the cellars, the faint tang of a nearby stable. Elizabeth steps from her litter, her gown a cascade of emerald silk, her wig pinned with pearls, her gloves steeped in rose oil. Her fragrance cuts through the air, a sharp contrast to the earthiness of the countryside. The courtiers follow, their own scents musk, civet, lavender clashing with the smells of the estate. They fan themselves, their painted faces glistening in the heat, their smiles fixed as they bow to their queen. The challenge of hygiene on progress was immense. At Whitehall, Elizabeth's maids had a routine, ceruse to paint her face vermilion. For her cheeks, wigs brushed and powdered, gowns aired and scented. On the road, this ritual was compressed, performed in cramped chambers or makeshift tents. The maids carried pots of ceruse and vials of rosewater in leather cases, their hands steady despite the jolting of carriages. They applied the Queen's makeup by candlelight, the lead paste drying unevenly in the humid air. The vermilion, with its mercury sting, was dabbed quickly, the maids praying it wouldn't crack in the heat. Elizabeth sat still, her expression calm, her body aching from the journey, but her myth intact. Her wigs were a particular challenge. In the palace, they were stored in boxes lined with mint, brushed daily to preserve their shape. On progress, they were packed in straw, their curls crushed, their scent fading under the dust of the road. The maids worked frantically, brushing them with squirrel tail brushes, dusting them with violet powder, and tucking sachets of orris root into the coils. But the wigs absorbed everything: the smoke of campfires, the sweat of a long day, the damp of a rainy afternoon. By evening they were heavy, sour, a faint reminder of the body beneath. Elizabeth wore them without complaint, her head high, her scent overpowering the truth. And silk, never washed, were vulnerable to mud and rain. The maids brushed them furiously, using stiff bristles to remove dirt, but stains lingered, hidden by candlelight or covered with new embroidery. Sachets of lavender and clove were tucked into the folds, their fragrance a desperate defense against the smell of travel sweat, horse, damp wool. The courtiers followed suit, their own gowns and doublets brushed and scented, their discomfort hidden behind smiles and bows. The houses where Elizabeth stayed were a test of ingenuity. Noble hosts spent fortunes preparing for her arrival, sweeping floors, hanging tapestries, and burning juniper to clear the air. They sprinkled rushes with thyme, draped tables with rose-water-soaked linen, and scrubbed privies with vinegar. But these estates were not Whitehall. Their drains were crude, their rooms draughty, their air heavy with the smells of rural life, hay, livestock, wet earth. The Queen's maids worked tirelessly, setting up her close stool in a private chamber. Servants like Jane, from our earlier tale, carried buckets of rosewater, refilled pomanders, and swept away the day's dust. Their labor, the backbone of the Queen's illusion. The courtiers faced their own struggles. Lady Margaret, with her burgundy gown, found her ceruse melting in the summer heat, her face streaked by evening. She dabbed more lead, hiding the redness, ignoring the itch that spread across her cheeks. Lord Thomas, with his oiled beard, struggled to keep his musk fresh, the scent fading under the dust of the road. They carried pomanders and scented handkerchiefs, pressing them to their noses when the air grew thick with stable smells or unwashed crowds. Their linens, changed daily in the palace, were rinsed less often on progress. The vinegar and rosewater barely masking the sweat, yet they smiled, their fragrances a quiet echo of the Queen's, their loyalty a performance as grand as her own. The progresses were also a stage for diplomacy. Elizabeth's scent was a tool, a way to impress foreign ambassadors who joined her on the road. At Kenilworth, a Spanish envoy might bow before her, his nose brushing her glove, the rose oil overwhelming his senses. He would write home, describing not just her wit, but her fragrance, a detail that carried weight in the courts of Europe. The courtiers watched, their own scents a bid for notice, their pomanders gleaming in the sunlight. The air was a battlefield, not just of politics, but of perception, where fragrance signaled power, loyalty, and ambition. The lead and mercury, the unwashed fabrics, the crowded conditions, they weakened the court, body by body. Elizabeth's tremors grew worse on the road, her headaches sharper, her teeth aching from the jolting of the litter. The courtiers, too, suffered rashes from ceruse, fevers from damp rooms, fatigue from endless performances. The fear of water persisted, even in the countryside, where streams were cleaner than London's Thames. Bathing was rare, seen as a risk, and the court relied on scent to mask the truth of their bodies. Yet Elizabeth's progresses were a triumph. Her fragrance, her painted face, her glittering gowns, they dazzled her subjects, silenced her critics, and cemented her myth. She rode through towns, her scent drifting over crowds, her presence a reminder of her divinity. The courtiers followed their own illusions intact, their sacrifices a testament to her power. As you drift now, picture the caravan winding through the countryside, the air heavy with rose and dust, the Queen a beacon of light and scent. Let the hum of history carry you deeper into the quiet of the past. The road grows still, the fragrances linger, and the story waits for your return. If you're joining us now, find a cozy place to rest, perhaps with a warm blanket draped over you, the faint hum of a fan in the distance, or the flicker of a single candle casting shadows to lull your mind. We've wandered through the radiant halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, watched the courtiers' perfumed masquerade, endured the hidden costs of their beauty, and followed the Queen on her fragrant progresses. Tonight, we step into the intimate world of Elizabeth's ladies-in-waiting, the silent guardians who crafted her image, tended her body, and preserved the myth of the Virgin Queen with their tireless hands and unspoken loyalty. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the private chambers of Whitehall Palace, where the Queen's illusion was born in the hands of those closest to her. Picture a quiet morning in the Queen's privy chamber, the air cool and heavy with the promise of dawn. The tapestries glow softly, their threads catching the first light, weaving tales of gods and heroes across the walls. A fire crackles in the hearth, its warmth mingling with the scent of rosemary and lavender, strewn in the rushes and tucked into every corner. The windows are shuttered, sealing out the damp London air, believed to carry the invisible threats of plague and fever. Elizabeth sits before a silver mirror, her robe loose, her hair uncovered, her face bare of the cirrus that will soon transform her into a monarch. Around her, her ladies-in-waiting move with practiced grace, their hands steady, their eyes lowered, their silence a testament to their duty. They are the architects of her myth, the keepers of her secrets, the ones who turn a woman into a queen, scent by scent, layer by layer. These women and Mary, Elizabeth, Catherine Eyre, not just attendants, they are confidants chosen for their loyalty, their discretion, and their skill in the delicate art of presentation. They come from noble families, their blood as blue as the velvet they handle, but their role is one of service, their lives bound to the Queen's. Their hands are soft but calloused, their fingers stained with the residue of lead and rosewater, their days consumed by the task of making Elizabeth divine. They know her body better than anyone, the smallpox scars on her cheeks, the thinning hair beneath her wigs, the tremors in her hands from years of mercury. They see the truth, but they never speak it. To serve the Queen is to preserve her illusion, to guard her humanity with silence and scent. Let's follow an one of the senior ladies-in-waiting as she begins the morning ritual. Her gown is simple, a muted green that won't outshine the Queen, but her hands are steady, her movements precise. She starts with the cirrus, the white lead paste that defines Elizabeth's beauty. The pot is heavy, its contents creamy and cold, with a faint metallic temps that clings to the air. Anne dips a cloth into the paste, smoothing it over the Queen's face, blending it carefully to hide the scars, the redness, the lines of a woman in her 40s. The cirrus dries to a flawless mask, pale as moonlight, a symbol of nobility in a world where tanned skin means labor and low birth. But Anne knows its cost. She sees the rashes on Elizabeth's neck, the flaking patches at her temples, the way her skin grows raw with each application. She says nothing, only blends the paste more carefully, ensuring no cracks form in the heat of the day. Next comes the vermilion, a scarlet pigment ground from cinnabar. A mercury or Anne applies it sparingly, a dab on each cheek, a brush across the lips, mimicking the flush of youth. The mercury stings, its poison sinking into Elizabeth's nerves. But Anne's touch is gentle, her hands steady despite the weight of responsibility. She knows the tremors it causes, the faint shake in the Queen's fingers, but she hides it, dusting crushed pearl powder over the vermilion to add a shimmer that catches the candlelight. The result is radiant, a face that glows like a portrait. But Anne sees the truth, the way the Queen's eyes tighten with pain, the way her smile grows guarded as the day wears on. She says nothing, only adjusts the mirror, letting Elizabeth see the myth, not the woman. The wig is next, a ritual that requires both skill and patience. Elizabeth's natural hair, once a fiery red, is now thin and gray, a secret Anne guards with her life. The wig, a cascade of curls lacquered with wax, is chosen with care, bold for a public audience, delicate for a private council. It's never washed, only brushed with squirrel tail brushes and dusted with violet powder to mask its smell. Anne lifts it carefully from its box, lined with mint leaves to preserve its scent, and pins it in place with jeweled combs. The wig is heavy, pressing on Elizabeth's scalp, its curls absorbing the sweat of the day, the smoke of the palace, the dust of the court. In summer, it grows sour, a faint reminder of the body beneath, but Anne tucks sachets of orris root into the coils, ensuring the Queen's fragrance remains divine. The gown is a production of its own, a task that requires multiple hands. Mary, another lady-in-waiting, joins Anne, her fingers deft as she laces the corset, its whalebone creaking under the strain. The gown, a deep sapphire embroidered with silver stars, is heavy, its layers pinned and tied with precision. It's never been washed. Water would ruin the silk, fade the dye, dull the pearls, but Mary brushes it with stiff bristles, airs it near the fire, and tucks sachets of lavender and clove into the folds. The scent is overwhelming, a cloud of spice and flowers, but it doesn't fully mask the gown's history: sweat from a tense negotiation, wine from a spilled goblet, the faint musk of a long reign. Elizabeth stands still, her posture regal, her body aching under the weight. But her ladies work in silence, their hands a quiet vow of loyalty. The gloves are the final touch, a signature of Elizabeth's power. Catherine, the youngest of the ladies, presents them soft kid leather, steeped in rose oil, their fragrance so strong it lingers in the air. Elizabeth slips them on, her hands hidden, her tremors concealed. The gloves are a barrier, a way to offer her hand without offering her skin. Courtiers will kiss them, their lips brushing leather instead of flesh, a ritual that binds them to her without breaking the illusion. Catherine checks each glove, ensuring no stains mar their surface, no stiffness betrays their age. They carry the residue of the dink grease, the faint temps of sweat, but their scent is stronger, a reminder that even the Queen's touch is sacred. The ladies-in-waiting are more than maids. They are confidants, their bond with Elizabeth forged in the intimacy of these rituals. They see her vulnerabilities, the sores on her skin, the pain in her eyes, the sourness of her breath from rotting teeth. They know the cost of her beauty, the lead that burns, the mercury that trembles, the wigs that ache. But they also know her strength, her wit, her relentless will to rule. They share quiet moments, a smile when a pin slips, a nod when a brush catches a snag. They are her shield, her mirror, her silent partners in the dance of power. To serve Elizabeth is to love her, to sacrifice their own comfort for her glory, to weave her myth with every stroke of the brush. Their labor extends beyond the Queen's body to her surroundings. They sprinkle rushes with thyme, burn juniper in braziers, and dab rosewater on the tapestries. They ensure her close stool, the private toilet, is lined with herbs, its chamber pot scrubbed with vinegar. They refill her pomanders, silver orbs filled with ambergris and rosemary, and stitch sachets for her gowns. The air in her chambers is a tapestry of scents, each one a deliberate choice to mask the truth, the palace's crude drains, the sourness of unwashed fabrics, the faint Thames of bodies pressed too close. The ladies work tirelessly, their hands raw, their lungs heavy with smoke, but their efforts are invisible, their names rarely spoken. The courtiers, too, rely on their own attendants to maintain their illusions, but none match the intimacy of Elizabeth's ladies. Lady Margaret, with her burgundy gown, has her own maids who paint her face, brush her wigs, and scent her gloves. Lord Thomas, with his oiled beard, depends on a valet to dab musk on his wrists and polish his boots. But their rituals are less sacred, their stakes lower. To fail Elizabeth is to fail England. To fail a courtier is merely to lose favor. The ladies in waiting carry a heavier burden, their loyalty a vow that binds them to the Queen's body, her scent, her myth. This intimacy comes with a cost. The ladies see Elizabeth's pain, the headaches from her wigs, the rashes from her ceruse, the tremors from her vermilion. They feel their own aches, their hands stained with lead, their skin irritated by the same perfumes they apply to the Queen. They share her fear of water, her belief that bathing invites disease. When Elizabeth bathes perhaps monthly, a rare concession, they line the tub with linen, scent the water with rose petals, and stand guard to ensure her privacy. They rinse her linens in vinegar, air her gowns by the fire, and pray the miasmas stay at bay. Their lives are a mirror of hers, their sacrifices a quiet echo of her own. As you drift now, picture the privy chamber at dusk, the candles low, the air heavy with rose and clove. Elizabeth sits, her wig removed, her face bare, her ladies moving around her like shadows. The Queen is human for a moment, her myth paused, her vulnerability is safe in their hands. The palace is quiet, the court asleep, the air thick with the day's scents. Let the hum of history carry you deeper into the gentle stillness of the past, We've wandered through the radiant halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, watched the courtiers' perfumed masquerade, mourned the hidden costs of their beauty, followed her fragrant progresses, and met the silent guardians who crafted her image. Tonight, we step beyond the palace walls into the towns, villages, and homes of Elizabethan England, where the Queen's hygiene practices rippled outward, shaping the culture, fashion, and very scent of a nation. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the wider world of Elizabeth's reign, where her fragrance cast a long shadow. Picture a bustling market square in London, the air thick with the smells of fresh bread, roasted meat, and the muddy Thames. Merchants call out, their voices mingling with the clatter of carts and the chatter of townsfolk. From a distance, it's a lively scene, a tapestry of color and sound. But breathe deeply, and the truth emerges: sweat-soaked wool, unwashed bodies, the sharp bite of livestock and refuse. This is England in the 16th century, a world where cleanliness is an illusion, where water is feared, and where scent is a sign of status. Yet, even here, in the chaos of the market, the Queen's influence is felt. Her image pale, perfumed divine sets the standard. Her rituals of beauty and fragrance echoed in the lives of her subjects, from nobles to merchants to the humblest of villagers. Elizabeth's court was a beacon, its radiance spilling beyond Whitehall to shape the nation's culture. Her painted face, her rose-scented gloves, her towering wigs, they were not just royal quirks, but a blueprint for aspiration. In a time when pale skin signaled wealth, when fragrance marked nobility, the Queen's appearance was a model for anyone with means to mimic it. Noble women in distant manors, merchants' wives in city homes, even ambitious villagers with a few coins to spare all sought to emulate the Virgin Queen, to capture a fraction of her divinity through the alchemy of scent and appearance. Her hygiene practices, though rooted in the court's unique pressures, became a cultural touchstone, a way to signal loyalty, status, and sophistication. Let's imagine a merchant's wife, Alice, standing in her modest home near Cheapside. Her gown is simple compared to the Queen's, a sturdy wool dyed a deep blue, but she wears it with pride, its hem brushed clean and tucked with a sachet of lavender. She cannot afford ceruse, the white lead paste that defines Elizabeth's beauty, but she dusts her face with chalk powder, a cheaper alternative that mimics the Queen's pale glow. The powder is gritty, itching her skin, but Alice endures it, knowing that pale skin sets her apart from the tanned laborers in the market. She dabs rosewater on her wrists, a luxury bought from a traveling peddler, its scent a faint echo of the Queen's rose oil. Her hands, rough from household work, are hidden in gloves not leather, but linen, scented with thyme from her garden. She dreams of Elizabeth, whose portraits hang in guild halls, whose fragrance is whispered of in taverns, and she feels a connection, a shared pursuit of cleanliness through scent. This pursuit is not just vanity, it's a cultural shift driven by Elizabeth's example. In the early years of her reign, beauty was simpler flushed cheeks, natural hair, minimal adornment. But as Elizabeth's myth grew, so did the nation's obsession with artifice. Her ceruse-painted face, her towering wigs, her perfumed gloves became symbols of power, imitated by those who could afford it. Noble women in the countryside ordered vials of rosewater from London, their maids brushing their gowns with lavender to mimic the Queen's scent. Merchants' daughters saved for pomanders, small metal orbs filled with herbs, hoping to capture a whiff of courtly elegance. Even villagers, too poor for such luxuries, tucked sprigs of rosemary into their aprons, believing it brought them closer to the Queen's divine aura. The fear of water, so central to Elizabeth's court, rippled outward to shape the nation's hygiene habits. Physicians across England echoed the court's beliefs, warning that bathing opened the pores, letting in miasmous vapors blamed for plague and fever. In towns and villages, people avoided water, relying instead on vinegar, rosewater, or herbal rinses to cleanse their skin. Soap, made from lye and animal fat, was harsh and rare, used more for laundry than bodies. Alice, like most, wipes her face with a cloth dipped in vinegar. its sharp smell a faint defense against the odors of her home, smoke from the hearth, grease from the kitchen, the faint temps of unwashed linens. Her children, too, are cleansed. This way, their hair sprinkled with thyme to keep it sweet. Bathing, when it happens, is a rare event, done with caution in a wooden tub, the water scented with herbs to ward off disease. This fear shaped the way homes were kept. In wealthier households, rushes covered the floors, strewn with mint or lavender to mask the smell of damp and dirt. Tables were wiped with rose-water-soaked cloths, their surfaces gleaming under candlelight. In poorer homes, like those of laborers, floors were bare earth, swept daily but heavy with the smells of cooking and bodies. Herbs were a luxury, so families burned dried sage or juniper, hoping to clear the air of miasmas. The Queen's influence was felt even here, in the sprigs of rosemary tucked into doorways, the faint hope that a cleaner scent meant a cleaner life. Elizabeth's fragrance, her obsession with rose and clove, became a national ideal, a way to aspire to something greater than the mud and sweat of daily life. Fashion, too, bore the Queen's mark. Her towering wigs, once a courtly oddity, became a trend among the wealthy. Noble women ordered wigs from London, their curls stiffened with wax, their scent preserved with violet powder. They were never washed, only brushed and aired, their weight a burden but their status undeniable. Merchants' wives, like Alice, could not afford wigs but pinned their hair in elaborate coils, dusting them with chalk or orris root to mimic the Queen's look. Gowns, too, followed Elizabeth's lead, heavy with embroidery, laced tight with corsets, never washed but brushed and scented. The wealthy used lavender and clove, the poor used thyme and mint, but all sought to capture the Queen's aura, to smell of power even if they could not wield it. The health costs of these practices were felt across the nation. The lead in ceruse, the mercury in vermilion, the unwashed fabrics, they were not confined to the court but spread to anyone who could afford them. Noble women suffered rashes and tremors, their skin burned by lead, their nerves frayed by mercury. Merchants' daughters, using cheaper imitations, faced similar pains, their chalk powders irritating their eyes, their unwashed gowns chafing their skin. The fear of water left bodies vulnerable, sweat and dirt trapped beneath layers of cloth, breeding infections that physicians could not cure. Tooth decay, like Elizabeth's, was common among those who could afford sugar, their breath masked with cloves or mint, but never truly clean. Yet the Queen's influence was a source of pride. Her portraits, circulated in prints and coins, showed a woman untouched by time, her face pale, her fragrance implied in the roses painted at her feet. Townsfolk whispered of her scent, of the rosewater that trailed her like a cloak, and they sought to emulate it, to feel closer to her divinity. When Elizabeth passed through on her progresses, crowds gathered, their noses catching the faint whiff of her perfume, their eyes dazzled by her painted face. They didn't see the rashes, the tremors, the rotting teeth. They saw a queen, eternal and untouchable, her cleanliness a myth they longed to share. This cultural ripple extended to the arts. Poets praised Elizabeth's radiance, their verses filled with images of roses, lilies, and ambergris. Playwrights wove her beauty into their works, describing heroines with pale skin and perfumed hands. Painters, commissioned by nobles, mimicked her style. Their subjects posed with pomanders and starched ruffs, their faces painted white. The Queen's hygiene practices became a national aesthetic, a way to define beauty, power, and loyalty. To smell of lavender, to pale one's skin. To avoid the dangers of water, these were not just habits, but declarations of allegiance to Elizabeth's England. As you drift now, picture a village at dusk, the air heavy with the smells of hay and smoke. Alice stands at her door, her face dusted with chalk, her hands scented with thyme. She dreams of the Queen, whose fragrance lingers in stories, whose image shapes the nation. The market is quiet, the candles low, the air thick with the days. Sense, let the hum of history carry you deeper into the gentle stillness of the past. The village sleeps, the fragrances linger, and the story waits for your return. We've wandered through the radiant halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, watched the courtiers' perfumed masquerade, mourned the hidden costs of their beauty, followed her fragrant progresses, met the silent guardians who crafted her image, and traced the ripples of her hygiene practices across England. Tonight, we step back to reflect on the enduring legacy of Elizabeth's rituals, the way her scent, her painted face, and her myth of cleanliness shaped not just her time, but ours, echoing through centuries to define beauty, power, and the human struggle to transcend the body. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the eternal glow of Elizabeth's reign, where her fragrance lingers in the air of history. Picture a quiet evening in Whitehall Palace, the year 1603, the final months of Elizabeth's life. The candles burn low, their tallow wicks casting a soft, wavering light across the tapestries. Clove, ambergris, layered over the faint tang of unwashed velvet and the smoke of a dying fire. Bed, and prepare her for rest. She is no longer the radiant virgin queen of her portraits, but a woman, frail, weary, yet still a monarch, her myth intact even as her body fades. This is the moment where her legacy crystallizes, where the rituals of her hygiene, her painted face, her perfumed gloves, her unwashed gowns become more than personal habits, but a story that will outlast her, carried forward through time like a whiff of rosewater on the breeze. Elizabeth's hygiene practices were a product of her era, a time when water was feared, when cleanliness was measured in scent, when beauty was a dangerous art. Her serum face, her towering wigs, her rose-scented gloves, they were tools of power, crafted to make her divine in a world that demanded perfection from a queen who ruled alone. But their impact stretched far beyond her court, beyond the nobles who mimicked her, beyond the townsfolk who dreamed of her radiance. They shaped the way we think about beauty, about power, about the body itself, leaving a legacy that lingers in our fascination with her, in our laughter at her unwashed wigs, in our awe at her ability to turn poison into majesty. Let's begin with her image, the painted face that defined her reign. Elizabeth's use of ceruse, the white lead paste that smoothed her smallpox scars and declared her nobility, was not just a personal choice, but a cultural revolution. In the 16th century, pale skin was a status symbol, a sign you didn't toil in the sun, and Elizabeth made it a national ideal. These images were not just propaganda, but a blueprint for beauty, imitated by noble women, merchants, wives, and anyone with the means to buy chalk powder or lead paste. The queen's pale face became a symbol of aspiration, a way to signal wealth, refinement, and loyalty to England's radiant monarch. This obsession with pallor lingered long after Elizabeth's death. In the 17th and 18th centuries, European courts continued to prize pale skin, with women using lead-based cosmetics to achieve the look of their Renaissance idol. The dangers were known: rashes, sores, even death, but the ideal persisted, a testament to Elizabeth's influence. Even today, her image shapes our perception of beauty. The flawless faces in modern makeup ads, the filters that smooth our skin in selfies, they echo the Queen's Cirrus, her need to erase imperfection, to present a mask to the world. We laugh at her lead paint, but we recognize the impulse, the desire to transcend the body's flaws, to craft an image that outshines reality. Her fragrance, too, left a lasting mark. Elizabeth's rose-scented gloves, her pomanders of ambergris and clove, her gowns stuffed with lavender, they were not just personal preferences, but a declaration of power. In her time, scent was status, a way to prove wealth and divinity in a world where cleanliness was an illusion. Her fragrance was a weapon, overwhelming ambassadors, silencing courtiers, from the noble women who imported musk to the villagers who tucked thyme into their aprons. It shaped a culture where fragrance was identity, where to smell rich was to be rich, where a whiff of rosewater was a nod to the Queen's divine aura. This legacy of scent can be traced through history. The perfume industry, born in the Renaissance, owes much to Elizabeth's court, where rosewater and musk were prized commodities. By the 17th century, perfumers in France and Italy were crafting blends inspired by her, their vials labeled with names like Queen's, Rose, or Virgin's, Musk. Today, the perfume counters of department stores, the bottles of floral and spice, carry a faint echo of her reign. We may not fear water as she did, but we still use scent to define ourselves, to mask our flaws, to project power. The woman who sprays rose perfume before a meeting, the man who dabs cologne for a date, they are heirs to Elizabeth's alchemy, using fragrance to shape perception, to wield influence, to become more than their bodies. Her wigs, those towering sculptures of curls and wax, also left a mark. In her time, they were a necessity, hiding her thinning hair and smallpox scars. But they became a fashion statement, a symbol of courtly elegance. Noble women across England ordered wigs, their curls dusted with violet powder, their weight a badge of status. This trend spread to Europe, where wigs became a hallmark of the 17th and 18th centuries. Towering higher with each generation, their scent preserved with herbs and powders. Elizabeth's wigs were never washed, a practice that seems shocking now, but it set a precedent for the elaborate hairstyles of later courts, where appearance trumped comfort and artifice was king. Today, we see her influence in the wigs of fashion, the extensions and hairpieces that transform modern celebrities, the drag queens who tower in synthetic curls, the influencers who style their hair to mimic Renaissance portraits. They are distant cousins of Elizabeth's court, where hair was a canvas for power. We laugh at her unwashed wigs, but we understand the impulse to reinvent ourselves, to hide our vulnerabilities behind a sculpted facade. Her wigs were a shield, a way to defy time and illness, and that defiance resonates in our own pursuit of beauty, our own masks of perfection. the health costs of her practices, to have a legacy. The lead in her cerus, the mercury in her vermilion. Her courtiers suffered the same, their loyalty to her image a silent sacrifice. This willingness to endure pain for beauty persisted through the centuries, sake of appearance. Elizabeth's story reminds us of the cost. Rooted in the 16th century belief that it carried disease, also left a mark. While her subjects avoided bathing, relying on rosewater and vinegar, her influence helped cement a culture where scent was cleanliness. This lingered into the 17th and 18th centuries, when bathing remained rare and perfume was a status symbol. The rise of modern sanitation, with its pipes and soaps, owes little to Elizabeth, but her legacy persists in our rituals of preparation, the way we layer scents, smooth our skin, and present ourselves to the world. We may shower daily, but we still perform, still mask our humanity, still chase the illusion of perfection she perfected. Her legacy is most vivid in our fascination with her. Elizabeth remains a cultural icon, her image immortalized in films, books, and memes. We laugh at her hygiene, the unwashed wigs, the lead paint, the rotting teeth, but we also admire her. She ruled without a husband, without an heir, in a world that demanded both. She turned poison into power, scent into sovereignty, pain into permanence. Her story is a mirror, reflecting our own struggles to transcend the body, to craft an image that outlasts our flaws. We see her in the influencers who filter their faces, the leaders who project strength, the artists who turn vulnerability into art. As you drift now, picture Elizabeth one last time in the quiet of her chamber, the air heavy with rose and clove. Her ladies fold her gloves, sprinkle lavender on her bed, and step back, their work complete. The queen sleeps, her myth intact, her fragrance lingering like a promise. The palace is silent, the candles dim, the nation dreaming under her spell. Let the hum of history carry you deeper into the gentle stillness of the past. The world grows quiet, the scents fade, and the story rests, complete at last. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be soft, your rest deep, and your heart touched by the eternal scent of a queen. We've wandered through the radiant halls of Queen Elizabeth I's court, felt the weight of her unwashed gowns, watched the courtiers' perfumed masquerade, mourned the hidden costs of their beauty, followed her fragrant progresses, met the silent guardians who crafted her image, traced the ripples of her hygiene across England, and reflected on her eternal legacy. Tonight, we step into the grand theater of her state ceremonies, coronations, receptions, and public audiences where hygiene became a divine performance, a ritual of scent and appearance that transformed Elizabeth into a living icon. So, let your breath slow, your eyes grow heavy, and let's drift into the ceremonial splendor of Elizabethan England, where the Queen's fragrance was a crown of air, and her cleanliness a testament to her divinity. Picture a crisp morning in November, 1558, the day of Elizabeth's coronation procession through London. The streets are alive, with color banners fluttering, crowds cheering, the air thick with the smells of roasted chestnuts, muddy cobbles, and unwashed bodies pressed close. Trumpets blare, their notes sharp against the murmur of the crowd, and the Queen appears, carried in a golden litter, draped with velvet. Her gown is cloth of gold, its surface shimmering like the sun, its folds heavy with pearls and embroidered roses. Her face is painted with cerus, pale as a winter moon, her cheeks touched with vermilion to mimic youth. Her wig, a cascade of auburn curls, is pinned with jewels, and her gloves, steeped in rose oil, gleam in the weak sunlight. But it's her fragrance that commands the day, a blend of rose, clove, and ambergris that drifts over the crowd, a cloud of divinity that silences their chatter and draws their eyes. This is no mere woman. This is a queen, anointed by scent, her cleanliness a performance that declares her right to rule. State ceremonies were the pinnacle of Elizabeth's reign, moments when her myth was most visible, most vital. Coronations, receptions for foreign ambassadors, public audiences in the presence chamber. These were not just political events, but spectacles designed to awe her subjects and impress her allies. Hygiene played a central role, not in the modern sense of sanitation, but as a ritual of appearance, a way to craft an image of divinity in a world where the body was frail and the air heavy with truth. Her painted face, her perfumed gloves, her unwashed gowns, they were props in a grand performance, each one carefully chosen to reinforce her status as the Virgin Queen, untouchable, eternal, divine. Let's linger on that coronation day, the moment when Elizabeth, barely 25, stepped into her role as England's sovereign. The procession wound through London's narrow streets, past cheering crowds and makeshift stages where children recited poems in her honor. Her litter was a moving throne, its cushions stuffed with lavender to mask the leather's smell, its curtains sprinkled with rosewater to ward off the city's stench, refuse, livestock, the sour temps of unwashed humanity. Elizabeth sat upright, her posture regal despite the jolting of the litter, her face a flawless mask of cerus. The lead paste smoothed her skin, hiding the faint scars of her youth, but it itched in the cold air, flaking at her temples. Her maids, riding behind, carried pots of cerus and vermilion, ready to touch up her face at every stop, ensuring no crack betrayed her mortality. Her wig was a masterpiece, its curls lacquered with wax, dusted with violet powder to mask the faint sourness of unwashed hair. The weight pressed on her scalp, a dull ache that grew as the day wore on, but Elizabeth smiled, her eyes bright, her head high. The wig was pinned with gold combs, each one sparkling in the sunlight, a crown of curls that declared her youth and vitality. Her maids had brushed it that morning, tucking sachets of orris root into the coils, ensuring its scent blended with her own sharp rose, a warm clove, a deep ambergris that spoke of wealth and power. The crowd caught the fragrance as she passed, their noses twitching, their whispers hushed. To them, she was not just a queen, but a goddess. Her scent a divine aura that set her apart from the muddy streets. Her gown, too, was a marvel, its cloth of gold, heavy with embroidery, its sleeves slashed to reveal silk as white as her face. It was never washed, water would ruin the fabric, but her ladies had brushed it with stiff bristles, aired it by a fire, and tucked sachets of lavender and clove into the folds. The scent was overwhelming, a cloud that drifted from the litter, mingling with the city's smells but never succumbing to them. The gown chafed her skin, its weight pulling at her shoulders, but Elizabeth bore it without complaint, her movements graceful, her smile fixed. Beneath the gold, her corset pinched her ribs, trapping heat and sweat. But the fragrance of her sachets masked the truth, ensuring that only divinity reached the crowd. Her gloves were the final touch. Soft kid leather, steeped in rose oil, their fragrance so strong it lingered in the air. She waved them to the crowd, their white surface catching the light, their scent a silent command. When she paused to receive a bouquet of flowers from a child, a Bible from a cleric, she offered her glove for them to kiss, a ritual that spared them her skin but bound them to her power. The gloves carried the day's residue from the road, grease from a banquet, the faint temps of her sweat, but their perfume was stronger, a reminder that even her touch was sacred. The crowd, awed, breathed in her fragrance, their cheers a testament to her spell. This performance was not just for the crowd, but for the court, the ambassadors, the nobles who watched from the sidelines. A Spanish envoy, his doublet scented with jasmine, noted the power of her fragrance, writing home that her presence fills the air, as if she were anointed with the breath of heaven. A French diplomat, his pomander filled with musk, bowed low, his nose brushing her glove, overwhelmed by the rose oil that clung to it. The courtiers, too, played their part, their own sense of it. Lavender, clova, quiet echo of the queen's. Lady Margaret, in her burgundy gown, dabbed rosewater on her wrists, her pomander gleaming at her waist. Lord Thomas, his beard oiled with musk, pressed a scented handkerchief to his nose, masking the city's stench. They were her chorus, their fragrances a harmony that reinforced her melody. The health costs of these ceremonies were steep. The lead in Elizabeth's ceruse burned her skin, leaving rashes that her maids hid with more paste. The mercury in her vermilion caused tremors, a faint shake in her hands that she concealed beneath her gloves. The wig pressed on her scalp, the corset pinched her ribs, the gown trapped heat and sweat. Her teeth, rotting from years of sugar, ached with every smile, masked only by cloves and rosewater. Yet she endured, her face a mask, her scent a shield. The courtiers suffered tourashes from their own ceruse fevers, from crowded rooms, fatigue from the weight of their costumes. But they smiled, their loyalty a performance as grand as hers, their sacrifices a vow to preserve the myth. The palace's infrastructure, already fragile, was stretched to its limits during these ceremonies. Servants, like Jane, from our earlier tales, worked tirelessly, sprinkling rushes with thyme, burning juniper to clear the air, scrubbing closed stools with vinegar. The presence chamber, where Elizabeth held audiences, was a battleground of sense. On the tapestries, lavender in the rushes, smoke from tallow candles, but the drains, shallow and clogged, leaked odors that no herb could mask. The servants fought a losing battle, their hands raw from lye, their lungs heavy with smoke, but their labor was invisible, their efforts the foundation of the Queen's divine image. These ceremonies were a microcosm of Elizabeth's reign, a moment when her hygiene practices, her painted face, her perfumed gloves, her unwashed gowns, became a public declaration of power. They were not just rituals, but a language, a way to communicate her divinity to a nation that needed to believe in her. Her fragrance was her crown, her appearance, her scepter, her cleanliness, a myth that held England together. As you drift now, picture the coronation procession winding through London, the air heavy with rose and clove, the Queen a beacon of light and scent. The crowd cheers, the candles flicker, the myth endures. Let the hum of history carry you deeper into the gentle Stillness of the past. The streets grow quiet, the fragrances linger, and the story rests, waiting for your dreams.